better to thee than 10 sons. So he's saying that he's better to help her overcome what's bothering her. He's better than. I say it's his ego. Ain't I'm not better than 10? That's supposed to help her get past her weeping and everything, but it's beyond that. It's deep. It's deep, and he's not getting it right there. So Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh, and after they had drunk, now Eli the priest sat up on a seat by a post of the temple of the Lord, and she was in bitterness of soul, and prayed unto the Lord, and wept sore. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thy handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thy handmaid, but wilt give unto thy handmaid a man child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. We'll be coming back to some of this. That's why I want to read this. So keep your marker from the beginning. Don't cut off at 20. And it came to pass, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli marked her month. Now Hannah, she spake in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she had been drunken. And Eli said unto her, How long wilt thou be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee. And Hannah answered and said, No, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Count not thy handmaid for a daughter of Bela, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken hitherto. Then Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him. You see what happened right there? This is a transformation that took place. You got to watch that, because when that happens, we in our own world sometimes can miss it. And she said, Let thy handmaid find grace in thy sight. So the woman went her way and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. You see what happened? And they rose up in the morning early and worshiped before the Lord, and returned and came to their house to Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah, his wife, and the Lord remembered her. So you see, reason being I had to take you to the beginning is because we have to understand that Hannah commits her son to God. So you need to know when she did this, and then we have to understand the why. And because we have to understand the why, we're going to have to understand it from the beginning to get us to this point of 1 Samuel 1 and 20. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read verses 1 and 20, and then 26 and 28. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it from 20 to 28, just to keep the perception going. So please just bear with me when I get outside the line if you're not able to follow me. But I'll be going from 20 to 28. And what we're doing is we're looking at Hannah's answered prayer. Okay. Wherefore it came to pass, when the time was come, about after Hannah had conceived, that she bare a son, and called his name Samuel, saying, Because I have asked him of the Lord. Wow. And the man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer unto the Lord the yearly sacrifice and his vow. But Hannah went up, for she said unto her husband, I will not go up until the child be weaned, and then I will bring him, that he may appear before the Lord, and there abide forever. And Elkanah, her husband, said unto her, do what seemeth thee good. Tarry until thou have weaned him. Only the Lord establish his word. So the woman abode and gave her son suck until she weaned him. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her with 3 bullocks and 1 ephah of flour and a bottle of wine, and brought him unto the house of the Lord in Shiloh. And the child was young. And they slew a bullock and brought the child to Eli. And she said, O my Lord, as thou shalt liveth, my Lord, I am the woman that stood by thee here, praying unto the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord hath given me my petition, which I asked of him. Therefore also I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he liveth, he shall be lent to the Lord. And he worshiped the Lord there. Hannah, in the beginning, we seen that Hannah had her prayer, and she prayed continuously. And in doing so, she tells us how she poured out herself. And in doing that, that takes a lot. That takes a lot. You got to be straining with some issues that's really bothering you, and you want them to be solved. And because of your faith in God, you pour out with sincerity. And this is what Hannah was doing, pouring it out. I mean, in those days, let us understand that having a child by the husband was important. When they married, they had to have a child. Now just imagine, she had to have a child, but she did not have a child. So that was stressful. Now let's look at the second wife, because I'm believing that because she wasn't able to have a child at that time, the second wife was introduced and came into the fold. And when doing that, Peninnah was able to have children, and she did. So she flaunted that, at Hannah. And Hannah's prayers became real deep. Instead of fighting and fussing, Hannah endured, but she poured it out to God. She poured that out. She pleaded the plea. And what we have to identify with is, as you look at verse 11, I want you to identify what she's saying here. She says, and she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts. That's the first time that is mentioned in the Bible. Lord of hosts. That is the beginning, and Hannah is the one that brings it. Now, it's mentioned 235 times in the Bible, but this is the first time. And Hannah is doing it with her plea of pouring herself out to God. And while she's doing it, she said, if thou wilt indeed look up on the affliction. You see that? She feels she's been inflicted. In them days, if you didn't produce a child, people had a tendency to put, quote unquote, this measure on you and say you was cursed. So can you imagine, she's thinking, I'm cursed. This woman who's married to my husband is throwing this in my face that I can't have no child. That is stressful. So what is she supposed to do? Pour it out to God. How many times have we come up under situations that's beyond our control? We're supposed to give it to God, but we try and solve it. Hannah is showing us right here, right here in verse 11 how to approach that and trust it. Because she had to trust it. But she was pouring it out. Now, she could have fought Eli for even saying something like that. What you mean I'm drinking? I ain't drinking up in there. Can't you see I'm crying? No, she went on about her business and just let him know, this is raw. This is real. This is me pouring out. So in looking at that, what I want us to understand is her son. Elkanah's two wives were Hannah and Peninnah. Now, Hannah's name meant favor, okay? But Peninnah's, hers meant ruby. Ruby. Ruby? A ruby stone? Ruby stone? Yeah, ruby. And she wasn't no gem. She was constantly on Hannah. Okay, and Peninnah had children, but Hannah remained barren since it was desire of Jewish women to have at least one son, perhaps hoping he might be the Messiah. So the belief in God was present, but, you know, I don't care how much you determine if your womb is closed, it was closed. But Hannah knew something. She knew God. She knew what her God is capable of doing, and she's trusting it. She's calling upon it. Now, we see what the vow was in 11, and right there she tells him, I'll give him to you. I'll give him to you. That's a lot. And she was specific, a man-child. It gets deep. This was very painful for Hannah. Her pain was magnified by Peninnah's heartless reminders of her condition. You've seen that in verse 6. Peninnah especially enjoyed making her cruel remarks during the annual festival in Shiloh, where the Lord's tabernacle was kept. Wow. Not only is you flaunting it, you wait until you get to the place of worship and display it. That's like coming to church and just jumping out here saying, hello? She can't have no kids, y'all. What's wrong? That's how it feels. Because she's constantly throwing that in her face. During one especially sorrowful time in Shalom, Hannah wept and prayed so fervently that Eli, the priest, accused her of being drunk. Upon assuring him that she had not been drinking, Hannah explained that she was simply pouring out her anguished soul to God. Wow. Eli then blessed her, asking that God would grant her request. You see that? Upon acknowledging what she's doing, God turned around and made him a messenger just that quick. Eli was in the position of priesthood. They went to him. They was there, right there in Shalom. But he was thinking, now, she mumbling, she might be drinking, because it wasn't often that it would happen there at the synagogue. But now, once he conceived it, God used him and told him God would grant her requests. And in doing so, when Hannah left Eli's presence, she was no longer despondent, giving evidence of her faith in God, to whom she had been praying so fervently. You see that? Right there, when Eli told her that, she was relieved. She trusted what Eli told her. I don't know if Eli knew what she was crying for, but he must have heard her prayers to get an idea. But God used him to relieve her that it's going to be all right. And she trusted that. Sometime later, Hannah conceived and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel. Samuel's name means God here. That's, in the Hebrew, it says God here. So Samuel is born because she didn't name him. Now, the name Samuel in Hebrew sounds like heard by God. The baby's name itself would testify that God hears and answers prayer. After Samuel was weaned, Hannah took him to Shiloh and presented him to Eli. Let us understand wean. Upon having the baby, if it's a girl, usually they stay home 14 days. If it's a boy, they stay home 7 days. But we're looking at winging. So she's got to bring him about to, I guess, past pottiness and all this here, but she's winging him. And that can take anywhere between 3 to 5 years. And in doing that, she's spiritually teaching him, preparing him for the journey and commitment she had made. And in doing that, Hannah refused to go to Shiloh until he was ready, because she knew what she had said, and God did his part. She's about to do her part. And that goes to our title again. Hannah commits her son to God. In those days, 12, I think it's 12 or 13, you would consider grown adults to assume responsibilities. 13? And in doing that, they would have different rituals, one for the woman, one for the woman, one for the boy. But this was the process. So by the time, we're not sure by the time he got there, but I'm just guesstimating, he had to be at least 8 or older to get to the point where she had to commit him to God. But we're going to see through here, because she says, after Samuel was weaned, Hannah took him to Shiloh to present him to Eli. Now, we know about Eli and his 2 sons, old crooked things there. But Eli was a good man. He meant well, but somehow the communication between him being a good person and the sons, it didn't happen. Come up short. Her response in 1 Samuel 1 and 11, we read that Hannah had vowed to the Lord. We just went over that. O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thy handmaid and remember me, and not forget thy handmaid, but will give unto thy handmaid a man child. Then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. This was a promise to God that she would give the son she received back to him for a life of divine service. You know, Hannah displayed right there not only her faith in God, her trust in God, and showing us how to lean. I mean, she leaning hard on God. I need a child, and I need a man child, okay? She leaned in that favor, and she leaned in a crying state. But as we're going to see, she's going to flip the script in joy, because now she's fulfilling her part. I don't know about you, but that's not easy for a woman to let go of their child. When you say, I'm giving my child to God, you look up. And you might say, well, okay. But Hannah is taking the child to Eli. And Eli will take it over from there and inspire and work with him and all that to bring him about one with God. And in doing that, Hannah has no remorse, no second thoughts, no ill feelings about, wait a minute, I'll bring it back next year. She set the course, she set the tone, because God answered her. And because he answered her, she knew what she must do. And she trusted every bit of it. She honored her role, and she honored what God has done in fulfilling that for her. She did her part. Now, when Hannah reappeared before Eli, she first reminded him of who she was, and then presented Samuel as the answer to her prayers. Eli probably remembered that he had at first considered her to be drunk. In his position, Eli apparently has seen others in that condition. We are specifically told that his own sons were very corrupt. They cheated worshipers out of the best parts of their sacrifices. Now, those days they had to sacrifice the best of their flock. So you can imagine they being cheated out of it. It takes lies and manipulation to get something from someone who is following an order they believe is the truth. So now you take what they know, disrupt it, turn it, make it to your favor and say it's okay. You can take anything. Let me have that one right there for this much. That's not good. That's the opposite of what Eli stands for. So you can imagine that they corrupt, but yet they cheating worshipers. Not just anybody, worshipers. So they taking advantage of what he and the synagogue is doing and working it to their own benefit. Not good. Not good. And even went so far as to be immoral with the women who came to worship. This is not good. We know what immoral is. We should understand that as adults. We should know. In Eli's culture, Hannah was a shining example of the truly godly woman. One of her greatest acts of godliness was taking place as she brought Samuel to Eli and consecrated him to serve the Lord the rest of his life. The word Lent is unusual in this context, but its Hebrew root is the same that is found in petition. It's also ask and suggesting wordplay. The gift given to her by God is given back to him. That's the simplest form. Now we're going to take a look at Hannah's song of joy. And I'll be reading verses 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. Yeah, 1 through 5. Chapter 2, verses 1 through 5, and it reads as thus. And Hannah prayed and said, my heart rejoiceth in the Lord, my horn is exalted in the Lord, my mouth is enlarged over mine enemies, because I rejoice in thy salvation. There is none holy as the Lord, for there is none beside thee, neither is there any rock like our God. Talk no more so exceedingly proudly. Let not arrogancy come out of your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty men are broken. The bows of the mighty men are broken, and they that stumble are girded with strength. They that were full have hired out themselves for bread, and they that were hungry ceased. So that the barren had borne 7, and she that had many children is waxed feeble. Wow. So one can believe that right here, Hannah is mentioning Peninnah. She counted Peninnah as an enemy because God does things in good things. Peninnah was doing things in bad, instigating and just terrorizing her about what she's not able to do and what she wasn't capable of doing. Now, Hannah is in a position that says she can boast if she wants to. But Hannah's not boasting. But she is praying to the Lord about this. And she making mention, she ain't mentioned Peninnah's name, but those who was in the same category as Peninnah. Because it had to be more than just her talking about her womb being, and she can't do nothing, and she cursed. Misery likes company. And I'm sure there was company with Peninnah. And her little friends was talking about Hannah. Okay, that right there. So Hannah here is displaying. And the word, I want you to see this here. The word horn means strength. So in knowing that, she's trusting and she knows God will handle that. Now she feeling it, but she ain't went after. She didn't go after Peninnah, but she trusts the Lord will hear her cry again and relieve her of this. And I guess you could say make them aware of what they've done. Give them a tender heart, hopefully, so that they can realize what I do. I done sat up here and talked about this woman, and now she done produced, and then she done showed us something that we didn't even think about doing. She prayed to God hardly, poured it out because it was taken for granted to have a child. It's funny how those who can take advantage of it and just do it. But those who have a desire to have it and have not done it, that's a journey. That's a journey. When you're not able to have a child and you want a child, that's excruciating pain to that woman because her desires is into that and it's not happening. We see what Hannah did. She went to God. And when she went to God, God gave her what she asked for specifically. And she did her part in bringing him back. Now, the salvation of God was the heart attitude of Hannah is indeed amazing. God had finally given her a son, the greatest desire she had ever known. Now she was giving him back to God, leaving him with the priest and knowing he would no longer live in her home. Instead of mourning and longing for things to be different, Hannah humbled her heart before God in worship. In worship. That is beautiful to do that, because not only is you honoring what you said you would do for God, you also are doing what thus says the Lord with trust, with no ill feelings, no regrets, no nothing. You accepted it and you worship God in the presence of. Wow. Hannah's prayer is a remarkable expression of joy in the Lord. The song has strong verbal and conceptual connections to David's song near the end of 2 Samuel, and to Mary's song when she learned she was to give birth to the Messiah in Luke. Hannah began her prayer with an expression of rejoicing in the Lord. She then acknowledged that God had exalted her to such a degree that she could smile at her enemies. No more holding your head down, Hannah. You can hold it up now. And she's holding it up proudly, but she's holding it up humbly. She's not going, ha ha, I did it. Y'all didn't believe God could do. She didn't do nothing. She just held her head up. Because, see, Whatever they was putting on her, now it's right back in your face. What you say now? Because she got a child and she's giving him to God. Because that's who she prayed to. And she's giving him to God. So they have to face that and be in awe. Yes, sir.
Minister Joe, this reminds me of Psalm 23. He prepared the table before me in the presence of my enemies.
That could be. That could be. I mean, it actually happened. And he did prepare that table. And she's at that table. And they have to see her at that table now. So, yeah. Yeah, you can say that. They got a lot of other references that are used, but I didn't want to detour you on that. But, yeah. Yeah, that fit. She then acknowledged God had exalted her and she could smile at her enemies. A horn was a symbol of strength. God had provided salvation from the curse of barrenness and the accompanying shame heaped upon her by others, including Peninnah. No longer was Hannah an embarrassment to her husband for not giving him a male heir. No more embarrassment. Now she feels complete. She's bearing, she bared a child, a man child specifically, and now she's no longer embarrassed because that has been done. No longer could others mock and belittle her. No longer would she suffer the depression, wow, she had known. We don't know how long she went through that, but every year they went up to Shalom to worship and praise God. It had to be some years. And we're not going to forget, we know Peninnah did it up there when she was up there. But what did she do when she was back home? She had to deal with that every day. Every day she seen Peninnah dealing with them kids. She had to deal with that. And Peninnah didn't make it easy. You know, she probably was changing the diaper and smile at her. You know, but this was stressful because that was their custom. That was their ways. And she was coming up short. Hannah was coming. She wasn't having it. So that was hurtful, painful, and stressful. Now, we just got through with Ruth. And we know what Ruth went through. The pain and suffering emotionally is deep. That's depression. That can lead to something. You know, we didn't hear it, but, you know, that put you in a what they call it, a sunken place. Because you in there and nobody know you in there, but then people just keep antagonizing it to you, you know? But Hannah prevailed.
You know, the thing that I really got out of this story, I've seen several times, though, is the idea that the ultimate thing that God could do for you and to give it back to God. I mean, when I think about what He does for us every day, things He gives us, the minor things that He gives us, and we don't give back to Him. For Him to give her a son, a child, a barren child, a son,
Mm-hmm.
and for her to give it back to God,
Mm-hmm.
that's incredible to me. When I consider what He's done for me and what He does for all of us every day, and
I know what you're saying. You weigh it and you say, is we giving back what He is given? We say it all the time that, you know, no matter how much we try, we cannot beat God's giving. But just because you know this, it ought to push you to desire to do it more and more. A little bit at a time, but do more and more as you can. Because you're right. It's like we take advantage of what God has given us. When He wakes us up in the morning, that's the beginning. So you in the plan, there go the gift. Now, when you get out that bed, here go another gift. So we got to, you're breathing, you're in your right mind.
So keep in mind, in that time, that
worship God. That's not so nowadays. We are not close to God like they were in ancient times. They knew who God was.
And because of
They
that,
relied on God.
Children today don't know God.
well, we have a lot of distractions. We have many distractions. I'm gonna start with one: the TV. Okay. Then we gonna go to the phone. Yeah.
But let me say this, minister.
Yes.
Even though those distractions occurred, we had distractions when we were coming up. But it's the parent. It's what the parent does. The parent makes the decision in terms of whether you're going to serve the Lord or whether you're not going to serve the Lord. Case in point, your parents and my parents said that, hey, on Sunday, we're going to worship the Lord. Parents don't say that anymore. They don't, as generations comes more and more, then the further those generations get away from the Lord. Because God told Moses to tell Israel, for generation after generation after generation, tell your children about me. And he told Moses that, tell Israel that if you don't tell your children about me, he said, I will visit you for that. Well, where we are now as a people and as a generation, we no longer put God first. We give our kids the choice.
Well,
Whereas our parents didn't give us the choice.
well,
They made the choice for us.
I beg to differ because of famine. We've had famine that disrupted generations, and when I say
They had it in this time. Last week we studied about a famine
Yeah.
that disrupted a family.
when I say famine, I mean in drugs. Drugs.
But that's just, okay, let me say this and I'll debate with you on that. Drugs is just a statement of fact. It's just a hardship that came. But hardships have always come. Drug is just another one of those hardships. Hardships have always come. So we can't say that because of the hardship of drugs that drove us away from God. Drugs should have drove us closer to God. But you got the podium, so
I'm gonna have to table that one for further discussion because that would be opposite of what we're dealing with here with Hannah. But Hannah demonstrates her prayer and the follow through of prayer and her commitment. And when she does this, we only hear that Hannah done that. Peninnah didn't do that, and she got kids before Hannah. So we didn't hear that with them. Now, I want you to understand too, the husband is a Levite. And his position should have been a little bit more authoritarian with the priesthood in his bloodline, right? But it didn't happen because his response to Hannah in the beginning was, whoa, ain't I better than 10 men? When she needed comfort, when she needed love, or a supporting cast to her, pouring out to God, but Hannah didn't fret on that. She just went on about her business by praying to who? God. And Hannah shows us what's possible. Even today, this is possible. We got plenty of testimonies where people have prayed to God sincerely and consistently and meant it. And so God returned the favor, and he meant it. And now we have testimony. Now we have witnesses. And that ain't just for the fact of cancer or surviving surgery or a bad illness. It can go as simple as a broken bone. Some people don't mend back well, but you can be mended back. I got a daughter who was in a bad accident. Almost had to amputate her leg, her arm, and she had a cut across her chest. Her wrist should have been cut off. She survived. The car was a small car, but it wasn't that small. And it was all tore up, and she survived it. And she's walking, she's working, she's moving around. God sent. Because that was a bad accident. But I say that to say that it varies. As we can debate on and on how some will, some won't, some can, some don't, we still have it right here now today, though, as we best understand it. Hannah proved it to be then, and we have those who can prove it to be now. They're praying to God, he still answers prayers. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. But it takes your sincerity, your commitment, and your dedication. Hannah did that. Whose husband is a priest. That of the Levites. And we know that the Levites was a priestly family. But he didn't demonstrate none of much of that here. Hannah the one did it. Hannah. God touches everybody. But when you invest in God back, he gives back. And that's what Hannah said. You give me a man child. God said, okay, done. I'll give him back. That's what she said, verse 11. In the first chapter, it happened. So what we're looking at is that Hannah could be boasting, but she's not at this point. What Hannah did is prayed, and they called her prayer this time a song. So no longer was Hannah an embarrassment to her husband for not giving him a male heir. No longer could others mock and belittle her. No longer would she suffer the depression she had known. In this glorious provision, Hannah saw the working of the holy God. She celebrated God's unique holiness. There is none like him. None like him. In referring to him as a rock, she used a metaphor that speaks of his being strength for his own, a place of refuge for those in need, and delivered from trouble. So let us understand God's knowledge, because Hannah's words would now sound like she had experienced so much grief from others during her bearing condition that she felt compelled to warn them about brash talking. After all, those who had belittled her now had to face the fact that they were wrong. You see that? For all that they done, they had to face the fact that they was wrong. They counted her out before she counted herself out. Because she kept praying. She didn't count herself out. She knew something had to happen, and she went to who could do it, the source. And because she did that, the others didn't see that. They couldn't comprehend it. But she did it, and she proved it. And so now they had to be faced with what it is that they talked about her about. Wow. Can you imagine that? Everything you said about her, you have to take it back. I don't know, when I was little, you did something like that, you got to take that back. That's what they used to say, take it back. After all of it, in their pride, they had ignored the fact that God can do whatever, key word, whatever he wants, and can therefore reverse any situation as he had done her before. Wow, he had done for her, I'm sorry. Pride and arrogance. Come on now. That's a sermon there. Pride and arrogance should never come from the mouth of humans. For God is the God of knowledge and his knowledge is far superior to that of all humanity. Hannah knew that she did not need to get even with those who had persecuted her. God weighs what people do and say against his children, and he himself determines what needs to be done to defend them. So regardless of you thinking because somebody said something bad about you and they was wrong and they should own up to it and they don't, God will handle it. He gonna handle it to his degree. Now you might say, well, they need to walk over here and give me a formal letter and tell me in the public eye, because that's how they discredit me. But no, that ain't happening right here. She leave it to God. How many times God said the battle is not yours? The Bible tells us this. The battle is not yours. That's what he means. They're not yours. Let them walk away. Be a humble heart. Pray for them that despitefully use you. Huh? Because he will defend it. He will. You best believe that. I seen it. Beginning in 1 Samuel 2 and 4, 7 contrasts are listed in Hannah's prayer, or song, as many prefer to call it. This contrast is between those who are mighty and those who are weak. Reference to bows indicates weaponry used by the strong against the weak. In some cases, the weapons might be words instead of physical weapons, huh? Now, I used to be called all kind of names. And I went and told my mom, she said, sticks and stones may break your bones, but names should never hurt you. I hung on to that as long as I could. But after a while, I kind of forgot that and decided, well, let's battle, but it's true to his word. It's true to his word. God will take care of it. Because people intentionally doing you wrong, like Peninnah was intentionally doing Hannah, Peninnah gonna have to handle that. You see, Hannah say feebly waxed. So God is on the scene. Such was the case for Hannah, but God had broken the strength of her enemies, belittling words and giving them nothing more to say against her. At the same time, God had clothed her with new strength. Huh? Told her, lift her head up. You all right. That's a done deal. You prayed to me, I answered your prayer, and you came back. You came back, and you committed your child to me. Samuel, who is the last judge, okay, before the first king. She walked with her head held up and rejoiced in the Lord who had provided her salvation. Wow. God's justice is something. 2 more contrasts are mentioned in this verse. The first is between the full and the hungry, and the second is between the barren and the fertile. As in each of the other contrasts, Hannah reflected on the fact that God can completely change any, not some, any circumstances he wishes at any time. We cannot forget he's in control. He took Hannah's situation and changed it. And now she can walk with her head up. She done did what her part was. That's a beautiful thing. That's where God does his best work. Is when you was at your lowest point, he turned it. So man can't get no credit. Go, Hannah. Here's an example of how fleeing riches can be and why we should not place our trust in possessions. The one who once was full at one time, wealthy enough to never worry about food, when God removes the wealth, however, that person must work for wages in order to buy what is needed. Come on now. You used to people doing stuff for you because you got it like that and you're doing well. Then the table turns and you have to work for what you want. Sometimes the ones in that position who never had to work now have to work, they don't have no skills. They don't have no skills. They don't have no skills. So how do they provide? Circumstances and situations then put them on the other side of that. What do they do? That's a question mark. Because we have some that has went into that transformation. And it's not easy for them. However, that person must work for wages in order to buy what is needed. One, on the other hand, when God chooses to bless someone who is poor, that person who once regularly suffered hunger now has plenty. Hannah's point was that God can easily bring about such a change whenever he determines it. Again, God's choice. Not mine, not yours, God's choice. She then made a much more personal application of the principle by referring to one who was bearing. After Samuel's birth, Hannah eventually gave birth to 5 more children. So she gave one to the Lord, the first, the one she prayed for, but the one she said she will give back. Now, she didn't know if she was going to be able to have any more, but she trusted it. You see, because after Eli told her that her request would be honored, she wasn't sad no more. She was able to eat. So when that happens, a confirmation, there's a subtle part in you. When you know God is taking over, there's a part of you that says, I'm not worried anymore. It's going to happen. I don't know when, but it's going to happen. I'm trusting it. And that's what Hannah did. She trusted it. And because she trusted it, she had more kids. She had more kids. Her mention of 7 children in verse 5 is reference to the perfection this number stood for. Having Samuel made her feel complete and fulfilled, she felt strong and blessed, as opposed to others who may have given birth to many but lacked the same sense of God's blessing upon them. Man, makes me think about Peninnah. She had the kids, she flaunted it all in front of Hannah and everything. You ain't got none, and you can't have none. You been cursed. You ain't no good. You a rotten one, and all this here. Now the shoe is on the other foot, and they have to not only regret what they said, now they got to question their own faith. Because she trusted in God. Sincerely. I don't hear Peninnah praying hard like that to God about anything. Matter of fact, she showed out at Shiloh. When Hannah didn't have no kids up there while they praising and worshiping, Peninnah made sure that everybody knew she ain't got no kids. We all up here. She didn't bring nothing but her. Now the shoe is on the other foot. Because, see, Hannah knows God. She knows there's nothing not too hard for him to solve. So as we look at that, let me go into the ending of this here, where we'll see God's thunder from heaven. And I'll be reading verses 6 through 10. And it reads as thus. The Lord killeth and maketh alive. He bringeth down to the grave and bringeth up. The Lord maketh poor and maketh rich. He bringeth low and lifteth up. He raiseth up the poor out of the dust, and lift up the beggar from the dunghill, to set them among princes, and to make them inherit the throne of glory. Throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he hath set the world upon them. He will keep the feet of his saints, and the wicked shall be silent in darkness. For by strength shall no man prevail. Ha ha! Tell me. The adversary of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Out of heaven shall he thunder upon them. And, the Lord shall judge the ends of the earth, and he shall give strength unto his king, and exalt the horn of his anointed. That's deep. That's deep. That has to be understood, especially 9 and 10. The characteristics of that give strong implications of Jesus. It probably was not a conscious change of thought for Hannah at this point in her prayer, but she did seem to begin to reflect more seriously now than before. Her rejoicing turned to serious contemplation of exactly how God sovereignly oversees the situation people face. She has come to understand how God sees everything. There is a sense in which she moved away from being very personal and began to think more generally. Hannah recognized that all life is in the hand of God. Amen. He alone has the power and authority to give and take life. His power is so great that he can even resurrect those who are dead. The second statement of this verse is nearly synonymous with the first part being, the first part but serves to heighten or intensify the Lord's sovereignty in commanding life and death. Commanding, in charge, giving orders. God ain't to be played with. God also has control over the status in life each person experiences. Something Hannah had already mentioned in 1 Samuel 2 and 5, while people may think their success is due solely to their own ingenuity and hard work, it is really the blessing of God that makes a person rich. He likewise can cause the disappearance of riches from those who have them. Wow. God's help is, Hannah was particularly thankful that God helps those in need, for she had just witnessed his helping her with her great need. To illustrate his truth, graphically, she spoke of how God can rise a beggar to a position of wealth and honor. She described someone who sat in the dust and among ashes, not having a nice home or the comfort of clean and new clothing. This person had nothing to eat unless someone kindly gave him food or money. God, however, sometimes reaches down to such a person and dramatically causes a change of circumstances that is almost unbelievable. Instead of begging, he may suddenly find himself seated among those who have plenty and respected by all those around him. There is no need to speculate exactly how God does such a thing, for his ways are infinite, and he is able to accomplish something like this with anyone. The reason we can maintain hope in the midst of trials is that everything in the universe is God's. And under his complete control, Hannah spoke of the earth as being supported by pillars.